He aggressive in 2006. He goes, I don't want to see it.
Uh,
I hate when I see photos of myself younger.
Yeah, that's funny. That is funny. Oh boy.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are
I haven't done
you?
much lately. I did something on the sand. They showed their big hybrid stuff. I said, well, I'm on the sand. Okay, let me know. Was it good or bad?
How are you?
Mr. Chairman, see, that's what you got to do. Because once you've been chairman, you're chairman. You're never
Well, you,
so it's the old Mr. Chairman.
Well,
you're going to have a discussion with Harbaugh. I want you to publicly announce that to our staff that Bill and I are to be.
and it's not real flavorful process.
Then that'll really send them through the roof.
How are we going to know who we're talking to?
And that's exactly right. You only
I think that's right. Hey, did you get packed last night?
half packed.
Good.
Half packed.
We lunch at Queen was nice. I didn't like my meal, but the atmosphere there was really.
Been there a while.
I've never had dinner there. No, because it was always too crowded. And, yeah, but it was bigger than I thought. And Deb and I had gone there.
They knocked down a wall or something.
Well, they have an upstairs, and then they have a restaurant next to it now called Rubicon.
Yeah,
But-
I've been there recently.
I don't know if they have because I don't. Yeah, I didn't like Rubicon, but this I liked Mangiaqui. Dick liked it. Tony and I had a swordfish over couscous and tomatoes, and so I like the couscous and tomatoes. Swordfish, very fishy, very fishy.
I am not
We
a fan.
told them
That's
about that.
That's why I'm usually not a fan of swordfish, because it can be like that.
Is that right?
Sometimes. My wife loves it. She goes crazy for swordfish.
I never knew.
Well,
Never had it.
I think it's a matter of how it's prepared. I suspect.
Yeah.
If they bake it, it's probably going to
Fishier.
be fishier than
Yeah.
if they grill it.
Yeah.
Grilled swordfish tastes more like, not steak, but
Yeah.
it's got that kind of texture to it.
Yeah.
It's like grilled tuna.
Yeah. Hey, how are you, John? How are you? Good, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to tell them that. We'll remind them of that. Hey, Rich.
Yeah.
But
Why don't we give it 10 or 15? 10. Yeah, this is.
I think so.
Doesn't sound like your mic's on.
The appointed hour having arrived.
She wants to get her.
I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. Before we begin, as always, I'd like everybody to turn off their electronic devices, or the sound at least. Thank you. With us today, Fred Strathmeyer, representing Russell Redding, the Secretary of Department of Agriculture, Jen Langen, representing Tim Reese, the State Treasurer, and Bob Coyne, representing Eileen McNulty, Revenue Secretary. Thank you all for coming. A quorum of the board being present, I will call this meeting to order. First order of business, the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one scheduled hearing today regarding the Category 2 license renewal of Mount Airy, Number 1 LLC, which operates the Mount Airy Casino in Mount Pocono. Can we have the representatives of Mount Airy? There you are. Thank you. I would ask that everybody who's going to speak, please state and spell your name for the court reporter. And if you're not an attorney, I'd ask you to be sworn in. So who do we have here today?
John Coletsu, that's JOHNCULETSU, Executive Vice President, General Manager for Mount Airy.
Would you please stand and be sworn?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Just identify yourself, please, before you proceed.
Sure. Michael Sklar, SKLAR, on behalf of Mount Airy Casino.
Okay, you can begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We're going to try to keep the presentation brief. We had a detailed and extensive testimony in April at the public input hearing. So we're just going to try to highlight some of the accomplishments and positive benefits that have been generated by Mount Airy. John is going to handle the presentation, and I just want to introduce Lisa DeNaples, the owner and managing trustee of Mount Airy, and Patrick Burke, who's the director of finance. And to the extent there's any questions that they need to answer, they're certainly available. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Good morning, thank you, and we appreciate the opportunity to present Mount Airy's story. As Michael said, we'll make it fairly brief, or as extensive as you gentlemen would like, of course. And just to give you a little bit of background information and about get this clicking. Okay. We can go to the next slide, please. Just a little bit of a brief information on property overview. Of course, Mount Airy, located in northeast Pennsylvania. We're coming up on an anniversary in October. The property opened in October 2007. We are the first AAA four-diamond casino resort in the state of Pennsylvania. We're very proud of that proud of that accomplishment, and we just actually, within the past month, received our 7th consecutive AAA 4-Diamond Award. So we continue to serve the Commonwealth well, and of course provide a superior quality customer service to our guests. Talk a little bit about our gaming floor. Presently, we have 79 table games, 1,875 slot machines. Over the course of the past few years, we have altered our game mix significantly. We've gotten to know our customers a lot better over the course of that time, and consequently, as a result of that, we have made quite a few changes to our gaming floor, which have proven very fruitful over the course of this last few years especially. Talk a little bit about our hotel, because we're one of the few properties in the state and the gaming properties that has a hotel component. All 188 of our rooms are recently going under renovation, which we will complete in the 4th quarter of this year. The renovation is a complete overhaul of all of our guest rooms, the interior of the rooms, the bathrooms, and as you can see from the slide that's presented in your presentation, very well appointed, and the response from our guests has been just absolutely tremendous to our new product that we have. And we've also renovated all of our hotel suites, which we have 26 of on the property, and it's a complete renovation of those rooms also, just not a cosmetic renovation, it's a complete renovation of the entire guest rooms. Take a look at some of our food and beverage options. We're very excited over the past year and a half to add some marquee restaurants to our food and beverage options for our guests. Our high-end dining option is Bistecca by Il Molino. And for those of you who may or may not be familiar with Il Molino, it's a highly acclaimed restaurant started in New York City in the 1980s, and they now have 4 outlets in New York City and throughout other areas of the country. A high-end combination Italian steakhouse type restaurant. We've also added what's called Guy Fieri's Mount Pocono Kitchen. Guy Fieri himself made an appearance last week at the property. Tremendous response from our customers. Everything you see with him on TV is what you really get in real life also. He is quite a charismatic character, and he brings to the property great brand name recognition. I don't think you cannot turn on the Food Network at any given time and not see a Guy Fieri type show. So the exposure that we get from being associated with Guy has paid off in dividends to us in a short period of time that both those restaurants have been open. We also have a couple of other restaurants that we operate. One is the Lucky 8 Noodle and Sushi Bar, and that's about a year old. It's a smaller restaurant with only 30 seats, but has quickly become very popular. And we also operate a 325-seat buffet, serving lunch and dinner. We have convention and meeting facilities, approximately 5,500 square feet of space. It serves a couple of different functions for us. During the weekdays, we primarily do a lot of corporate type business. There are a lot of pharmaceutical companies in the immediate area where we're located, as well as in northern New Jersey, which utilize the facilities for training purposes and other type of classes and things of that for their staff members, launching of new products. The facilities also get utilized for social events, whether they be weddings, anniversaries, things of that nature also. So our meeting space is continually busy for us. We have this great, challenging 18-hole golf course, which also features a fairly new state-of-the-art clubhouse that we opened in 2012, about a $2 million investment there. It also has a pro shop and a small bar and restaurant as part of the clubhouse, accommodate up to about 100 people or so in the indoor and outdoor facilities. Golf, of course, seasonal in our area. We keep the course open from late March as late as we can go into November if possible. But golf is a very successful amenity for us. It just adds further into what Mount Airy promotes itself and markets itself as, which is as a complete destination resort. Our spa and fitness center had approximately 16,000 square feet of space with 11 treatment rooms available to our guests, and it don't only serves our guests, but it also serves local community residents, and has also a great exercise room component to the facility. Once again, adding to the resort amenities that we offer. The latest addition to Mount Airy, and when we met back, I think last time was 2012, a little over 3 years ago at our license renewal here, we talked about creating this great pool feature, and it's not just a pool by any means of the imagination. Hopefully, some of you got to witness and experience what we've built. It's a $6 million pool project, indoor-outdoor facility. It has a restaurant component to it. It has a bar component. There are fire pits outside. There are cabanas indoors, outdoors. So the Get Wet Ultra Pool facility also serves multiple purposes for us. First and foremost, it's serving our hotel guests. Secondly, it serves as another destination resort type amenity that local residents can enjoy and experience. It also serves as a nightclub venue for us, and it also serves as another addition to our banquet and meeting space that various companies will use to rent out for social type functions. So the success of Get Wet has been absolutely amazing. We've been able to attract some high quality DJs to the venue, some reality TV stars, and just a multitude of different type of entertainment functions that we're utilizing Get Wet for. So it's a 12-month, year-round facility because it is indoors and outdoors. So it really is a huge amenity, and it really sets Mount Airy, I think, apart from a competitive perspective, and once again emphasizing a complete resort destination where on any given day you can have great spa treatment, you can go work out, you can enjoy the pool facilities, hear a great DJ, play golf, hiking trails on our land, on our property also. So it really encompasses everything that everybody want to do, in addition, of course, to gaming and food and beverage and our hotel accommodations. Here's another picture of Get Wet. This is an interior picture of the venue. It's a total of 51,000 square feet of space in which it was built on. The pool itself is over 94 feet in length, so about the equivalent of an NBA basketball court. Just to talk a little bit about some of our ongoing capital expenditures over the last couple of years, we mentioned Get Wet, which is at the cost of about approximately $6 million. The golf clubhouse was a little bit over a $2 million investment. Our gaming floor product, which we continually look to enhance, this past year we've spent about $1.8 million in new slot product for this year, as we did the previous year too in 2015. And then our hotel room renovation, which is costing us approximately $5 million to renovate 188 rooms. So that's a pretty hefty investment, obviously. And as I said, it's just not a cosmetic renovation. It's a complete renovation of rooms. So we have put a lot of emphasis, as you can tell there, in making sure we bring a quality product to our guests. And once again, we feel that is one of our strong competitive advantages. Talk a little bit about the overall economic impact of Mount Airy since opening and through December 31st of 2015. Total taxes paid during the course of this time was $791 million generated, including $111 million in local share tax. Other taxes paid, of course, also include property tax, which we are the largest in Paradise Township at $28 million. and then, of course, about $16 million to the Commonwealth in sales and use tax during this time frame. What has Mount Airy done to the community? It's significant. There was once a place called the Mount Airy Lodge, and many will probably remember that jingle, the great, Mount Airy Lodge commercial that was on for many years in the 60s and 70s. And unfortunately, that Mount Airy Lodge closed down due to economic conditions. And, the DeNaples family spent a considerable amount of money, obviously, in building a quality product that created over 1,100 jobs in a community that was really desperate for employment opportunities. The impact alone has been $185 million in salaries, wages, and benefits paid to the Mount Airy employees. It's over $295 million to gaming service providers, including minority and women business entities, $37 million, local business entities, $69 million, and Pennsylvania business entities, $147 million. Just to take a brief look at some of the employee statistics for our property, we have approximately 1,122 employees. The number of regional employees are approximately 91% of our workforce. And the number of PA resident employees is 95% of our workforce. Number of female employees, 506, or 45% of the workforce. And the number of minority employees, 447, 40% of our workforce. And the number of minority professionals, 39, approximately 26% of our workforce. So we have a very diversified workplace at Mount Airy. Talk a little bit about how we recruit employees to the property. We are in a location that has somewhat of a limited population, so there is challenges to that. One of the things we do have is a great relationship with the East Stroudsburg University, which does have a hospitality program as part of their curriculum, and we have numerous students that work for us and are also attending the hospitality school there. So for lack of a better way to put it, they have a little skin in the game. This is the profession they're so choosing to look forward to getting into in their future, and they have a place at Mount Airy to learn different aspects of the industry, whether it be gaming, marketing, hotel operations, sales, food and beverage. So a great opportunity for quite a few of the students to be able to work, live, and go to school in the local area. And East Stroudsburg is only about 11 miles away from the property. We also have Northampton Community College, which is about 5 or 6 miles away from the property. And just last year, they started a hospitality program. I've been invited and been fortunate to be able to go over there to speak to the students, and their energy is just tremendous. A lot of them grew up in the immediate area, and you have to believe that they're going to stay in the area with someone like Mount Airy and a couple of other new resorts that have recently opened in our area, providing them with opportunity, which wasn't there necessarily 8-9 years ago. So some of the other means, of course, in which we look to attract employees are through career days on site, on property, through various social media, internet websites and things of that nature. We continue to look to recruit new employees through various means such as that. A little bit about our benefit package. We have a very competitive benefit package that we offer our employees. Of course, it includes medical, dental, life, short and long-term disability. We also have an employee assistance program for those employees that may have any type of special need, a completely confidential employee assistance program. We have a company-sponsored 401k plan, and then we have an array of other sponsored voluntary benefits, short and long-term disability, flexible spending account. And one of the other things that we do have that I haven't mentioned that it's not on the particular slide is something we call the Sunshine Fund. And what that is basically is it is a fund that is set aside in which any one of our team members may have an issue financially, maybe a challenge in paying their rent, a utility bill, a car payment. Maybe they had something catastrophic occur in their lives. Mount Airy will basically give them a donation, if you will. It is not something that we require to be paid back to us. And we have a Sunshine Fund committee that exists of a combination of some hourly team members and management team members that review any requests that are made from somebody from our Sunshine Fund, and then we allocate the funds to that team member. Employee training is a big part of what we do. It's one thing to have a great property with tremendous capital investment in order to, build a great pool, wonderful restaurants, reinvest in our hotel rooms. But a big part of being a AAA four-diamond resort is ensuring that you deliver from a customer service perspective. And it really is very competitive in the service industry today. So we have put a lot of emphasis on training. All of our employees, every single employee, no matter what level, whether they are full-time or part-time, are trained in guest service training annually. It's mandatory guest service training classes that we have to go through, and then we have an array of other different classes all pertaining to guest service in specific areas for different levels of management and hourly team members. Some of the other things we do, of course, property-wide, very important. Ramp training. All of our food and beverage employees are ramp trained. All front of the house food and beverage employees are ramp trained. All of our security employees are ramp trained, and they have to be renewed every other year for ramp training certification. We've just introduced over the course of the past year extensive Title 31 training for all of our gaming employees, cage, table games, credit, player development. So very important training class continually being offered to all of our employees. And then we, of course, always have compulsive gaming training that we do annually. We will be doing our annual employee compulsive gaming training in November of this year, the first week of November. It's mandatory for all 1,122 of our employees. For those employees who may not be there at the training due to vacation or whatever, we mandate before they can come back on the schedule that they have to view a video of that training class that just took place. So every employee gets recertified on an annual basis on compulsive gaming training. And just highlighting some of those items here again on this slide that we just discussed. Talk a little bit about our contributions to the community and our community involvement. Our charitable cash contributions from 2007 through the end of 2015 totaled approximately $433,000. We also do quite a bit of contributions on what we call in-kind, and that is something we're able to do because of the vast amount of different facilities that we have that we can offer customers, hotel rooms potentially, dining facilities, spa services, entertainment and show tickets, golf tournaments, golf foursomes. So these are all items that we donate regularly to charitable organizations that make such requests to us. And just highlighting some of those community partnerships and some of the things that we've done. Boys and Girls Club, we have a great relationship with Pocono Alliance, the Animals Golf Tournament, and a couple of others, including the Women's Resources of Monroe County. And here's a little bit more extensive list of the various organizations that we've participated with from a charitable perspective. And they are a combination, including of cash donations, services donations, the different amenities that you just looked at. And continue with some of the other community partnerships. And that was the quick, brief overview version.
Thank you. That concludes our presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions or comments from Enforcement Council?
Yes, good morning, Chairman Barish, David Tepper, TEPPER, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Mr. Coletto, on slide 7, you discuss hotel renovations. Is Mount Airy on track to meet the November 2016 completion target?
We should complete our renovations at the end of this year. We have one floor to go, of approximately 30 some odd hotel rooms. So we're certainly on track. During the summer months, we don't do any renovations just because of a high occupancy demand, so it limits our capability to do any renovations.
Excellent. On slide 19, of your total employees, what percentage are full-time versus part-time?
76% of our employees are full-time.
And how many employees are eligible for benefits?
Presently, the amount of employees eligible, well, all full-time employees are eligible for benefits, okay? So all full-time.
And are part-time employees eligible for any benefits?
We do not have any medical-type benefits for our part-time employees. They do, of course, get complimentary meals in the EDR during their shift and participate in other Mount Airy employee-related activities, golf tournaments, and things that we do for our employees. Part-time absolutely can participate.
Excellent. Has Mount Airy implemented any additional procedures to deter and detect underage individuals from accessing the gaming floor?
Well, it is always a challenge, as we know, and we certainly have spent some money in the past year in trying to better deter underage gaming and underage patrons from visiting our floor, and it becomes more and more of a challenge as the Pocono region has had some growth in the area of water parks and family-type attractions, so we're seeing a lot more families visiting the property on a regular basis. One of the things that we installed in December of this past year was something called a advanced ID detection system, and I noticed some of our fellow properties at the parks have also utilizing this, and Valley Forge. And what it is basically it's an advanced ID detection system where it takes a ID, a license, or whatever form an ID is using. It scans the ID. It checks multiple different things on that ID to confirm that it is truly a valid ID, and it also presents a picture of the patron who is trying to access, which is a lot different from the older type of hand swipe IDs that were traditionally used, where you would not get a picture of the person to match their ID. It's a laptop type screen, like the laptop next to me, and a whole facial visual image of the potential guest is displayed on that laptop. So you not only are checking the different boxes as to age and things like that that are on an ID, but you're also doing a visual check on the person.
And in the past, there have been numerous incidents of employees accidentally removing tracker keys from the premises. What steps has Mount Airy taken to prevent tracker keys from being removed?
Well, we've actually, good question. We just installed a new system called Visible, and I just happen to bring one with me. This is a beacon. Let me open this up here. Very simple little device. This is it. And it gets attached to a tracker key. And what it simply does is when a key leaves a certain area of the property, an alarm goes off, a strobe light goes off, and an audible alarm goes off, and a message is also sent to the department manager on his or her cell phone, informing them that a device is out of range, if you will. So we've just installed this in the past month, and it's great technology. It also goes off in our security dispatch office. So somebody walks out the doors with a key now, a strobe light is going to go off, a siren is going to go off, a siren or an alarm will go off in security dispatch, and lastly, on the handheld or the cell phone of the department manager, they will get a notification that a key is not where it's supposed to be. It's out of range, basically. So there it is.
Thank you very much. We have no further questions.
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, yes. Mr. Kletsu, I have 2 or 3 questions. What are the terms of your 401k?
The terms as far as
An employee, do you have a match? Is it up to a certain percentage?
There is no match at this time, Commissioner, but employees can contribute up to the maximum that are allowed under 401k now, which I believe is $16,000 or so a year annually. And there's a multitude of various funds. Most of them are within the Vanguard fund family.
How many of your folks are in the 401k plan?
I'll have to verify that question for you to give you an exact number. I don't want to give you
Do you have a range?
incorrect.
Or you
Well,
want
all of our employees upon hire, full-time employees, are automatically enrolled in the 401k. They can then opt out if they so choose to, if they do not want to. So they are automatically entered in the 401k upon hiring from a full-time perspective. And I'm sorry, we have 68% of our employees are in the 401k plan.
okay. How about your retention rate or the number of percent? Let's say the last 2 years. Each year, how many folks have not remained in employment, either voluntarily leaving or being let go?
So our turnover rate, basically? Yeah. Our turnover rate this past year is approximately 37, past year about 37%.
And how is that 37% in your 8 years of operation? Has it been around that number? Has there been a trending, or how would you respond?
It's been trending pretty much around that area, anywhere from 35, 36, 37, 38% over the course of the past 5-6 years. It's remained about the same. We do have a lot of seasonal employees because of the nature of our location. Our peak season will run starting in May, right around Memorial Day weekend. It's still peak season through Labor Day, of course, and during the fall, we're still quite busy. Fall foliage, it's a popular attraction in the area we are. But we do hire a significant amount of seasonal employees, and a lot of them are those students who are going back to school and are not with us. Our golf course, of course, closes down, so there's over 20 employees there. Our pool, the outdoor portion of the pool closes, so there's some closure of, there's some less employees there. So we have certain venues that are seasonal venues that employees are seasonally employed.
As to your charitable contributions, $433,000 over the 8 years, that's approximately, let's say, $54,000 a year. Has that been an average per year? Has it ramped up in the last 3 or 4 years? And then the second part of that question is, how do you triage the folks that come to you that have needs? How do you make the decision? What's the process as to who has benefited?
The contribution has been fairly consistent, Commissioner. We have a committee that consists of our owner, myself, our VP of Marketing, our Executive Director of HR, and the administrative assistant to both the owner and myself. And we basically, on a monthly basis, we will look at those requests for charitable contributions. Our first and foremost focus is on those that are local oriented in the local community that we will have preference to. And then we will get requests sometimes from customers that regularly frequent the property, and we will also take those requests under consideration for charitable purposes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kalitsin.
Other board members, questions?
Just one question, if I could. I did appreciate the presentation in April, very thorough. Having read the report for this relicensing hearing today, your compliance has been very strong, and I appreciate that. But from a marketing standpoint, New Jersey, what percentage of your customers are coming from New Jersey on a regular basis, and what's your level of angst about this fall's referendum?
Right. Well, approximately 35% of our business comes from northern New Jersey. And, there's nothing we can do about a Northern New Jersey vote if that is to come to fruition. Over the course of the past 6 years, there's been a lot of growth in the Northeast gaming market. And, we've seen a nice, steady, consistent increase in our revenues over the course of that time in spite of, additional inventory coming on in adjoining states. And, we can control our destiny and our fate. And, we're a pretty lean organization. We are not top-heavy, and we can adjust to the market demands and needs as best we see fit. And would we like to see that Northern New Jersey thing go away completely? Absolutely, Commissioner, we would. But if it is to come to fruition, we'll make adjustments like we have in the past.
Thank you very much.
Bill?
Just one question, Mr. Kletsu. You just talked about potential competition from New Jersey. There is also, I guess, even more potential competition from New York. How do you see that impacting Mount Airy?
Of the 4 licenses that were allocated in New York, I believe maybe one of the 4 properties will have an impact on, or some potential impact on our business based on its location, and that's the Catskills location. It is approximately 95 to 100 miles north of New York City, which is about the same distance that we are from New York City, and the same for that Northern New Jersey customer, for that Bergen and Essex County customer that comes to Mount Airy regularly, which is about 90 miles away from the Catskills, is about 90 miles from us. So of the 4 licensees in New York State, that property could potentially have some impact. And as I understand, it is being marketed and designed as a resort similar to Mount Airy, highly amenitized with golf course, spa, high-end restaurants, a diversity of restaurants too. And it could be a little bit of a challenge, that location. But I'm, to be honest, not as concerned about the other 3 just because where they are geographically.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really just have 2 comments. First, I wanted to say thank you to you and the Naples family for providing the Commonwealth with another premier facility. I think it's fantastic. And then you referenced an old commercial, just to show you how good advertising is. 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I would get home from school during the Hanna-Barbera cartoon hour, why they were advertising a honeymoon resort, I'm not sure. 226-0841, your honeymoon hotline for honeymoon fun. I still remember it.
You never got married?
And that's got to be. Didn't hear what he said.
Never got married.
That figures. You're right. Just great advertising, though. The phone number's no good anymore, though.
I don't think so.
Calling it a lot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tony, you're always tough to follow, my friend. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions, Mr. Sletsu. Your hotel occupancy rate on a 365-day a year, what is the average?
95%.
And of that 95%, what is the comp percentage versus cash percentage?
The comp percentage is about 45%.
Okay.
And the cash is 55%.
What is the average salary? And again, we have talked about some of these issues when we had the hearing up in up near in Paradise Township, but I do like to ask them again, just because this gets a lot more viewing and puts it on the public record again. But what is the average salary of a full-time employee, excluding benefits, if you have that, and if not, you can give it to us later, but I'd like
an hourly employee, Commissioner? you're referring to?
a full-time employee. So I assume if you have full-time hourly and full-time salary, I'll take both of them, but excluding the benefit component.
A non-tipped employee, the average salary is $14 per hour.
Okay.
That That is not including overtime, of course. That's a straight hourly rate. And a salaried employee, which we have approximately 147 salaried employees at Mount Airy, the average salary is $59,000 annually.
So the salaried employees, you said, what, 148, did you say?
147 salaried employees.
147 out of the 1,100. So the vast majority of your employees, obviously, are hourly employees. Okay. The guest services training that you do, you had mentioned, you're pretty consistent on that. Is that done by internal folks, or do you hire an outside consultant to do
We
that?
have a training manager, internal. We have done some external training also. Of course, the ramp training is external. The compulsive gaming training is an external facilitator. But most of our in-house customer service training classes are done by our training manager.
Okay. And last question, I know that you had mentioned you do a job fair at Camelback, and I've been up there. I know they put in that pretty impressive water park over the last couple of years. Does that help you, hurt you? I could see it going both ways, that it's another competitor with a hotel and things like that. But at the same time, you had mentioned earlier about bringing additional people up into the area for vacation. So does that help or hurt the casino?
Oh, I think it helps.
Okay.
And it may help the casino a little bit. It also helps the food and beverage outlets. It brings people to the area. And, that's one thing that was kind of missing in the Poconos for quite a long time. Tourism had died off there until Mount Airy reopened in 2007. And there's many shuttered resorts throughout the area. If you drive around, you see today that are boarded up and have never reopened. But you mentioned Camelback, which is a very nice new 500-room facility with an indoor-outdoor water park and zip lining and all kinds of fun things like that. So it's not only just children that are appealing. It not only appeals to children, but it appeals a little bit to adults, which is good for us because we want adults, of course, to come in and participate in the gaming side of our business. And there's another water park that opened about 4 miles away from what's called Kalahari, and that's also about approximately 500 rooms, 100,000 square foot indoor and outdoor water park with extensive meeting facilities. So drawing more people to the area is good for us.
And just one last comment to echo Commissioner Moscato's comments. I mean, you have an unbelievably impressive facility up there, and congratulations.
Are there any questions from ex officio members this morning?
With the water parks up there, I mean, so let's say the families are coming to enjoy your dining facilities. Are the entrances to those dining facilities off the gaming floor, and how do you prevent children from getting from the restaurants onto the gaming floor? It's one of the concerns that we have, I think, at Sands and some of the other places that we've talked about before.
We have we have an escort system and process as part of our internal controls, and what that entails is a couple of different things. When a family comes up to the property and they have children who are recognized as being under 21 years of age, we do a couple of different things. We wristband them with a yellow wristband. We then call in that patron to our security dispatch, so they are aware that there's a patron going to be on the floor with a minor. One of our security officers will then escort that family to the restaurant outlet that they wish to go to. So they do require an escort of a security officer from one of our podiums. We have 2 entrances to the property. So the security officer will escort to the patron to one of the restaurants they want to go to. Upon entering the restaurant, at the table, a placard is placed on the table where the patron is sitting. It's a yellow kind of caution placard, if you will, advising that if there is a minor sitting there at that table. So obviously it helps notify the server too, which is a good notification there that there is a minor at the table. And it also states on there that they must notify the hostess when they're ready to depart the restaurant. And the hostess will then call our security dispatch. Security will go to the restaurant and escort that minor and their family off the casino, out of the restaurant back into their non-gaming area.
Is that it? Does Enforcement Council have a presentation this morning?
We have no formal presentation, but prior to today's hearing, I provided Mount Airy with updates to information contained within its background investigation report. Exhibit 2A is an update from the Pennsylvania State Police Bureau of Liquor Enforcement describing actions taken by the Bureau since Mount Airy's public input hearing. OEC requests that that it be added to Exhibit 2, which was moved into the record at the public input hearing.
So moved.
OEC also has an update to enforcement matters taken against Mount Airy since the public input hearing. There's been one compliance conference held. OEC requests that the compliance conference memorandum, which is marked as Exhibit 5A, be added to Exhibit 5, which was moved into the record at the public input hearing.
So moved.
And additionally, 4 warning letters were issued to Mount Airy by OEC since the public input hearing. OEC requests that these 4 warning letters, as well as the 3 responses received from Mount Airy, which were marked as Exhibit 6A, be added to Exhibit 6, which was moved into the record at the public input hearing, and notes that the 4th warning letter did not require a response from the property.
So moved.
And we further request that Exhibits 5A and 6A be marked as confidential.
Thank you. Any further comments from Mount Airy?
Just if we could move the PowerPoint presentation to the record.
So moved. Any other questions from the board? Ex officio
One
members?
further question. Have you given any consideration to some modicum of a match in your 401k? Because right now you have a, it's a tax deferral, but there's not much of an incentivization there to really be in the program. And have you given consideration to that?
Yes, we have, Commissioner. We would like to be able to offer that at some point. At one time, Mount Airy did initially upon opening, but I think as most of us experienced from 2008 and 2009 and onward, the economics of what occurred here throughout the U.S. And, we are now seeing some nice positive trend overall to our revenue and our bottom line, and hopefully sometime in the near future we will be able to provide that. Because I'm not too many years away from retirement either, so I'd like to see that.
Well, as you know, that's the thing that gives a defined benefit or defined contribution plan a real lift, and for retention too.
Thank you. A vote on this matter will be scheduled later today under the Bureau of Licensing section of the agenda. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I've done those plans. It's up to 50%.
By way of announcements, the board held an executive session yesterday, August 9th, for purpose of discussing personnel matters and to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters that are being considered today by the board. I'd also like to announce that the Gaming Control Board will hold a public hearing regarding the casino license renewal for Woodlands, Fayette LLC, operator of the Lady Luck Casino in Nemacolin, on September 14th at 10 a.m. at the Wharton Township Municipal Building, located 114 Elliotsville Road, Farmington, PA. Deadlines for registration to speak at this hearing and for receipt of public comment on the Lady Luck renewal is noon Monday, September 12th. Citizens and community groups and elected officials wishing to present oral or written testimony, which will become part of the evidentiary record in this matter, can now register by clicking on the quick links section of the homepage of our homepage, the Gaming Control homepage website. Written comments should be mailed to the Gaming Control Board at Box 69060, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, 17106. Attention to the board clerk. Comments can also be faxed prior to the deadlines at 717-265-7416. Next, consideration of a motion to approve the minutes and transcript of the June 22nd meeting. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the minutes of the transcript of the June 22nd, 2016 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. New business. First up, Claire.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. The Office of Human Resources has one motion for your consideration today relative to the hiring of one individual. Mr. John Pokanowski has been selected as a law clerk in the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Mr. Pokanowski has completed the PGCB interview process, background investigation, and drug screening, and is recommended for hire by Chief Enforcement Counsel Cyrus Petrie. Unless you have any questions, I ask that the board consider a motion to hire Mr. Pokanowski as indicated.
Any questions or comments from the board or ex officio members? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicant as proposed by the Director of Human Resources.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Dave Wren.
Good morning, Chairman and board members. I'm here today to provide a final accounting of expenditures for fiscal year 2015-16, which, as you know, concluded on June 30th. Although the year is complete, we still continue to receive additional invoices, so this report would include accounts payable. Expenditures for the fiscal year totaled $38.2 million. That was against an appropriation of $39.9 million, leaving us with a potential surplus of $1.7 million. Most of the surplus is due to a decrease in 11 filled positions from the prior fiscal year. Despite the decrease in filled positions, personnel expenses were up 3.4%, and overall expenses increased 3.5% for the fiscal year versus the prior year. Personnel expenses accounted for 87% of overall expenses at $33.2 million, $1.1 million higher than the prior year. For the year, benefits as a percentage of salary expenses totaled 67% versus 60% in the prior year. The operating and fixed asset component of the budget, the expenses totaled $5 million, about 13% of overall expenses for the year. This was up about $200,000 from the prior year, in which we realized our lowest level of operating expenses in 10 years. The increases were due to increased fingerprint fees due to increased volume and increasing IT expenses. As has been our trend, 80% of operating expenses were generally for real estate leases, interagency billings, and subscriptions, including database services utilized in background checks. Turning to the current year, our appropriation for fiscal year 16-17 is $40,619,000, an increase of 1.8%. Personnel costs are budgeted at $35.1 million and include a 20.2% increase to the employer contribution for pension costs. Operating fixed asset expenses are budgeted at $5.1 million, which was the average of actual expenses for the prior 3 fiscal years. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board or ex officio members? Anybody? Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Next, Doug Sherman, Chief Counsel.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Our first agenda item relates to 4 final form regulations, which Assistant Chief Counsel Susan Yoakum is here to present.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. The 4 agenda items all relate to the rules of play for table games. The first is Final Form Rulemaking 125-192. It will finalize regulations on 2 table games, Heads Up Hold'em and High Card Flush. We did make some revisions between proposed and the Final Form Rulemaking, specifically for Heads Up Hold'em. In response to comments we received from the industry, we did amend slightly our dealing procedure as a game protection measure. And for High Card Flush, we did add additional payout tables for the straight flush bonus and flush bonus side wagers. Be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this regulation.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to adopt Final Form Regulation 125-192 as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next item is Final Form Rulemaking 125-195, and this will finalize the regulations on three-card prime. We didn't make many changes between proposed and final other than adding an additional payout table for the bad beat bonus wager. It will allow facilities to offer a payout for a lower ranking hand at a flush rather than a straight. Again, happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to adopt Final Form Regulation 125-195 as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next regulation is 125-196, and this will finalize the rules of play for Saigon 5 card. We made no substantive changes between the proposed version that you've already approved and the final form that was presented to you earlier.
Questions or comments from the board or ex officio members? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to adopt Final Form Regulation 125-196 as described by the Office of Chief Counsel. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The last item is Final Form Rulemaking 125-198, and this will transition the game of 21 Baccarat into final form. Again, we made no substantive changes between the proposed version and the final version.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to adopt Final Form Regulation 125-198 as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank you, Susan.
Next for the board's consideration is a request to toll the time period by which the board must decide a request for reconsideration filed by Gaming Partners International, USA, Inc., and GPI Mexicana. As the board will recall, at the last meeting on July 13th, GPI was before the board with a petition asking for a waiver of licensure of two people holding an indirect ownership interest in the board's licensee, which was in excess of 5%. GPI failed to get a qualified majority of the board to agree to the request, and therefore their request had failed. GPI has now requested reconsideration of that decision. Pursuant to the board's regulation, if no action is taken on the request for reconsideration within 30 days of its filing, the request is deemed denied by operation of the regulation. In this particular case, however, the board's adjudication has not yet been issued, and therefore the rationale for the board's decision has not been publicly set forth. If the board were not to act on the reconsideration motion itself, and that is the bear motion, it would within 30 days be deemed, again, denied, and therefore GPI would not have come before the board with a motion based upon the rationale of the board. As a result, the Office of Chief Counsel believes it would be equitable for the board to consider a motion to toll that 30-day period, the running of it, until after the board issues the adjudication, so GPI has the opportunity to amend its motion for reconsideration and specify the grounds based on the adjudication. Therefore, we request a motion to that effect.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, yeah. I'm sorry, Doug, if you mentioned this and I missed it, but when do you expect that adjudication to be forthcoming?
I think we're in a position that let me say soon.
Okay.
We will be circulating
2 weeks.
We'll be circulating a draft of it to the board members for their review and comment. I would hope within 2 weeks would be a good estimate.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board toll the application of Section 494A.8 of the board's regulation until such time as the board's adjudication in this matter is issued, at which time the deadlines established in this regulation will run anew.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The board also has it before consideration a petition to lift a non-gaming employee registration suspension. The petition was filed by Xavier Wells and can be decided on the documents filed of record, as OEC has not objected to the lifting of the suspension. Mr. Wells had been employed by the Lady Luck Casino at Nemacolin as a barback. In February 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel was notified that Mr. Wells had been arrested and charged with numerous criminal offenses, which included 4 felony counts stemming from allegations that he, along with 2 other individuals, robbed and assaulted another person. On February 17, 2016, OEC filed a request for an emergency suspension, which was signed by the Executive Director on that date. On July 13th, the board issued an order continuing the suspension of Mr. Wells' non-gaming registration. Mr. Wells is now requesting that the suspension be lifted, as all of the criminal charges which had been filed against him had been dismissed by the District Attorney's Office. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has not objected to the request, as has been verified that in fact those criminal charges have been withdrawn, and that matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the petition of Xavier Wells requesting to lift the suspension of his non-gaming employee registration based upon the facts described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, presenting withdrawals and reports and recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Morning. The board has received several unopposed petitions to withdraw applications or surrender the credentials of individuals. The persons subject to these petitions are as follows: Robert Bone, Dorian Sloan, Thomas LaPlaca, Bruce Leslie, John Stepanich, Martin Franklin, Paul Seaman, and Edward Hannon. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objections to any of these petitions to withdraw or surrender credentials, and as a result, if the board were inclined to grant same, they'd be doing so without prejudice to each of these individuals. And these matters in bulk are now ready for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue orders to approve the withdrawals and surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next before the board for consideration are 9 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. In each case, the individual subject of the report and recommendation has been advised that the board would be taking the matter up today and that they had the right to come forward and briefly address the board. If any of these individuals are present, I'd ask that they come forward when their matter is called. I'd also note for the record that the report and recommendation and the entire evidentiary record have been provided to the board in advance of this meeting. The first report and recommendation pertains to Kendra Battle Garcia. In December of 2015, Ms. Battle Garcia submitted her non-gaming employee registration application so that she could perform work as a glazier at a Pennsylvania licensed facility as part of her employment with Guthrie Glass and Mirror Incorporated, a certified gaming service provider. The Office of Enforcement Counsel issued a notice of recommendation of denial of this application. However, based upon Ms. Battle Garcia's prior criminal history, including a 2011 conviction for several theft offenses and forgery charges stemming from an incident where it was alleged that she along with another individual, stole checks from a resident in an assisted living facility where she was working. Ms. Battle Garcia requested a hearing, which was held on May 5th. She did not, however, attend the hearing, and as a result, the evidence that was presented only by OEC, supporting its allegations that she had this prior criminal conviction. And as a result of that evidence, the report and recommendation issued recommends that her application be denied, and that is the recommendation before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Kendra Battle Garcia's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Derek Ezekiel's report and recommendation is the next matter before the board today. Mr. Ezekiel was issued a non-gaming registration on December 8th, 2015, and worked as an EVS attendant at the Parks Casino. On May 12th, 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Mr. Ezekiel's non-gaming registration after learning that he had been charged with several drug-related charges, including felony offenses. The executive director signed the emergency order of suspension on that same date. Pursuant to the board's regulations. A hearing on the validity of the emergency suspension was then held by the Office of Hearings and Appeals on May 24th, 2016. Despite receiving notice, Mr. Ezekiel did not attend that hearing. The evidence presented was presented solely by OEC and supported the allegations that these criminal charges were pending and remain pending, and as a result, the report and recommendation issued and before the board recommends that the suspension remain in place.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Derek Ezekiel's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Brittany Glass's report and recommendation is the next matter before the board today. Ms. Glass was issued a gaming permit on November 9th, 2015, and worked as a table games dealer at Harrah's, Philadelphia. On April 21st, 2016, the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement was notified that Ms. Glass had been charged by the Philadelphia Police Department with forgery, fraud, tampering with public records, and unsworn falsification. These charges stem from her actions with numerous co-conspirators and involve the theft of motor vehicles. The Office of Enforcement Counsel, upon learning of these charges, asked for an emergency suspension, which the Executive Director signed on April 22nd, 2016. Again, pursuant to the board's regulations, the matter was sent to Hearings and Appeals for a hearing, which occurred on May 11th. Ms. Glass did not appear at that hearing, however, and the only evidence presented showed that these charges do remain pending against her, and as a result, the recommendation is that the suspension remain in place.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt in result the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Brittany Glass's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter to be heard by the board pertains to the report and recommendation of Jose Gutierrez. On February 17, 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint requesting Mr. Gutierrez be placed on the board's exclusion list for leaving his 9-year-old son alone in his vehicle at the Parks Casino for approximately 20 minutes prior to Parks security locating the child and then locating him on the gaming floor and bringing him back to the car. A hearing in this matter was held on May 12, 2016. Both OEC and Mr. Gutierrez appeared and participated in the hearing. Mr. Gutierrez did not contest the facts alleged, however, indicated basically that he didn't feel the child was at risk because the car was running with the air conditioning on and he had a cell phone in his possession. Notwithstanding Mr. Gutierrez's testimony, the report and recommendation issued recommends that he be placed on the board's exclusion list. That's the recommendation before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Jose Gutierrez's placement on the involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next report and recommendation pertains to Matthew Hansel's request for reconsideration of the board's previous denial of his gaming permit renewal application. Mr. Hansel is presently employed as a player services representative at Sugar House Casino. On August 11, 2015, Enforcement Counsel recommended Mr. Hansel's application be denied based upon his being out of compliance with both state and federal taxing authorities. On November 20, 2015, the board denied his renewal application, and Mr. Hansel immediately filed a request for reconsideration, which is the matter before the board today. A hearing on that request for reconsideration was held before the Office of Hearings and Appeals this past January on the 21st. At that time, Mr. Hansel remained out of compliance with taxing authorities, and as a result, the hearing officer issued a report and recommendation recommending that his renewal application be denied. So that is the recommendation before the board right now, that his application be denied. However, I'm happy to report that since the issuance of that report and recommendation, Mr. Hansel has come into compliance with both state and federal taxing authorities, and as a result, the basis for the recommendation of denial originally has gone away, and I believe OEC at this point has no issue with his being, or no problem with his being issued a new gaming permit.
Any questions or comments from the board? Revenue Department's okay with this one? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board reject the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Matthew Hansel's petition for reconsideration of the denial of his gaming employee permit application, and that the board instead grant Mr. Hansel's permit renewal for the reasons described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
May I have, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next report and recommendation pertains to Kevin Harris. In December of 2015, Mr. Harris submitted a non-gaming employer registration seeking work as an EVS attendant at Harris, Philadelphia. The Office of Enforcement Counsel subsequently issued a notice recommending denial based upon a criminal record. Specifically, in March of 2011, Mr. Harris pled guilty to simple assault, and then later that year pled guilty to 2 felony theft cases. A hearing was requested in this matter by Mr. Harris. However, he failed to attend the hearing, and again, the only evidence put into the record was that of Enforcement Counsel's showing that these convictions actually occurred, and as a result of that evidence, the report and recommendation issued recommends that the application be denied.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Kevin Harris's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
William Jefferson's report and recommendation is the next matter before the board. On May 18th, 2015, Mr. Jefferson submitted a renewal application for his gaming permit so as to be allowed to continue working as a security officer at Sugar House, where he continues to work today. The Office of Enforcement Counsel issued a notice of recommendation of denial of Mr. Jefferson's renewal application. However, based upon his failure to cooperate in a background investigation, specifically during the review of his application, it was noted that he was not compliant with the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue, and BIE attempts to contact him to help him come into compliance were not responded to. As a result, a recommendation of denial was issued. A hearing was subsequently requested. However, Mr. Jefferson did not attend that hearing and failed to put on evidence to show that he was attempting to come into compliance. So the hearing officer recommends that the application be denied based in part on his noncompliance with taxing authorities and also on his lack of cooperation with BIE.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding William Jefferson's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next report and recommendation before the board pertains to Robbie Santavansky. On January 11th, 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint requesting that Mr. Santavansky be placed on the board's involuntary exclusion list for leaving his 9-year-old son alone in his vehicle. The complaint alleges that in January of 2016, Mr. Santavansky tried to enter the Parks Casino with his 9-year-old son. He was stopped by Park security who informed him that children were not allowed on the premises. Mr. Santavansky then asked security if they would watch his son or if he can leave them with him for a few minutes so he could go in and claim a promotional giveaway. He was told by security that children could not be left unattended and they would not allow him to leave the child in their presence. Mr. Santavansky and his son then returned to his vehicle in the parking lot. He pulled the vehicle out of its location, went to another entrance, parked the vehicle, left the son in the vehicle, and attempted to enter the casino. His entire movement, however, was monitored by surveillance, so security at the second location was notified that there could be a child, or there was a child in the car. He was immediately stopped and was told that he couldn't enter the premises because he was leaving the child unattended. Ultimately, he left, although again indicating and showing documentation that he was simply there to claim a promotional giveaway and not to gamble. As a result of that conduct, OEC brought the request to place him on the involuntary exclusion list. The report and recommendations subsequently issued by the hearing officer in this matter said that under these circumstances, the hearing officer felt that he should be placed on the list, however, only for a period of 6 months given the sort of unique set of circumstances here, and that's the recommendation before the board.
Any questions or comments from the board on this matter? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board reject the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the placement of Robbie Santavansky on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The final report and recommendation before the board today is that of Mark Thalheimer. In December of 2014, Mr. Thalheimer was issued a non-gaming registration to be employed as a valet attendant at Valley Forge Casino. He was terminated in January of 2015 for job abandonment, but retained his registration. On October 15th of 2015, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint to revoke Mr. Thalheimer's non-gaming registration. The complaint alleges that on July 9th, 2015, Mr. Thalheimer was charged with theft-related charges. Specifically, it was alleged that Mr. Thalheimer stole his employer's Visa debit card. In October of 2015, he pled guilty to one count alleging that charge and was sentenced to probation. A hearing in this matter was held on May 3rd, 2016. Mr. Thalheimer, despite receiving notice, did not attend that hearing. And as a result, the report and recommendation issued recommends that his non-gaming registration be revoked. And that is the recommendation before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the revocation of Mark Thalheimer's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
And that concludes all matters of the Office of Chief Counsel.
Before we proceed, I believe Commissioner Fite had a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the matter of Mr. Santavansky, this board has been pretty consistent in children left in cars, and I was going to wait. We have another matter coming up later on in the meeting. I was going to wait till then and make a comment generically, but we pride ourselves on looking at these cases, all the cases that we have, as unique sets of circumstances, and we also pride ourselves in not believing in the slippery slope, that when we make a decision in one area, if we have a fact pattern that's similar but maybe further down the line, that we can draw the line and say, well, that's a different fact pattern. And in Mr. Santavansky's case, we did place a lot of credibility on the fact that he was not there to gamble. And the child was 9, borderline age. And again, we have another case coming up, as I said, that's also in the same category, where you have children who are of age to, supervise themselves or even babysit others. So I do want to just reiterate to, especially, the Parks Casino, where we've had a number of these issues in the past, have come down pretty hard on the casino and the individuals who leave their children in cars, that this was a unique set of circumstances, and that the individual, we weren't happy that he tried to get in again, but the fact that he was, going to be there only to claim a prize and back out, and not there to gamble, was kind of the deciding factor in this case. But we will continue to evaluate these children left in cars on a facts and circumstances basis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I can elaborate on what was just said by Mr. Fite, I think I just want to add my 2 cents that the work of Parks here was outstanding, and we don't, here on the board, want any negative implication to be made from that. They did an excellent job here. You can tell if you're listening to the recitation of the facts that they were as diligent as they could be, and certainly the people at Park should be proud of their performance in this matter. It was just one of those difficult cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Sue Hensel.
Thank you, Chairman Barish and members of the board. Before the board today will be motions regarding one slot machine operator renewal license, one gaming-related gaming service provider certification, and 743 principal key gaming and non-gaming employees. In addition, there will be the consideration of 15 gaming service provider applicants. The first matter for your consideration is the renewal of the Mount Airy No. 1 LLC Category 2 license. The license renewal hearing for this entity is complete. In addition, the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has finished its investigation of the company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. As a result, the license renewal is ready for your consideration. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to renew the license of Mount Airy No. 1 LLC.
Thank you. Any comments from Enforcement Counsel?
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the Mount Airy No. 1 LLC Category 2 license renewal as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next for your consideration is the approval of a gaming-related gaming service provider certification for the Talisman Group, LLC. The Talisman Group is a Las Vegas-based company that created the Easy Baccarat game and related side wagers. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation of this company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with the background investigation and suitability report. I have also provided you with an order and ask that the board consider the approval of a gaming-related gaming service provider certification for the Talisman Group, LLC.
Comments from Enforcement Counsel?
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the Talisman Group LLC's gaming-related gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration is the approval of principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 2 principal and 3 key employee licenses. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Comments from Enforcement Counsel?
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of principal and key employee licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There are also temporary principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 1 principal and 13 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Counsel?
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, there are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 504 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 191 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Cyrus?
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of gaming employee permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also, there are recommendations of denial for 9 gaming and 4 non-gaming employee applicants. In each case, the applicant failed to request a hearing within the specified time frame. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the denials.
Enforcement Counsel?
Enforcement Counsel continues to request denial in each instance.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny the gaming and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In addition, for your consideration are withdrawal requests for key and gaming employees. In each case, the license or permit is no longer required. For today's meeting, I've provided the board with a list of 1 key and 15 gaming employee withdrawals for approval. I ask that the board consider the orders approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Chairman, I move that the board approve the withdrawals as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have an order to certify the following gaming service providers: Artisan Display, Inc., Singer Equipment Company, Inc., High Concrete Group, LLC, and KLWR, Inc., doing business as Cox Building Services. I ask that the board consider the order approving these gaming service providers for certification.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the applications for gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration, are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 11 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the applications for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, Susan. Next up is Enforcement Council.
Morning, Chairman, members of the board. The Office of Enforcement Council will present 22 matters for the board's consideration today, consisting of 2 consent agreements, 2 revocations, and 18 involuntary exclusions. The first consent agreement that will be presented has been negotiated between the Office of Enforcement Council and Sands Bethworks Gaming. That matter will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel Michael Rowland.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Michael Rowland, ROL A&D with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. First, we have a proposed consent agreement which involves 3 incidents of underage gaming at Sands Casino. In the first incident, an unidentified individual found a fake identification on Sands premises and turned it over to Sands security. Only 1 minute later, Keona Edwards approached the security podium to claim the fake identification. Sands security requested additional identification from Miss Edwards, but she advised that she only had additional identification in her car. Miss Edwards obtained the car keys from her mother, who was gaming at a table game, and security escorted both women to their vehicle. After arriving at the vehicle, Miss Edwards admitted that she did not have another form of identification and admitted being under 21. She was actually age 20. Miss Edwards was on the gaming floor for 4 hours and 28 minutes. She gamed at both table games and slot machines. No winnings were found on Miss Edwards, and no funds were confiscated. She did not consume alcoholic beverages. It was discovered that she gained entry through the bus entrance and was not carded by security. Miss Edwards was charged by the Pennsylvania State Police with carrying a false identification card and was permanently evicted from Sands Casino, and this incident was self-reported by Sands. Second occurrence involved when surveillance notified the Bureau of Casino Compliance about an underage male who was later identified as Michael Rohn. He was age 18, who entered the gaming floor via the bus entrance. He was on the gaming floor for approximately 51 minutes. Mr. Rohn entered the security checkpoint, and he also was unchallenged. He did not game, but he did consume 2 alcoholic beverages. He received both beverages approximately 15 minutes apart from the same cocktail server. Mr. Rohn was not carded. Mr. Rohn was discovered while attempting to enter the Vision nightclub, where he admitted he had entered the gaming floor. Mr. Rohn was found to be in possession of a fake Maryland driver's license and was charged by the Pennsylvania State Police with carrying a false identification card and purchase and consumption of alcohol by underage. This incident was also self-reported by Sands. The third incident, the Bureau of Casino Compliance was notified by security about an underage patron, Kira Fort, on the gaming floor. Ms. Fort was age 20. Ms. Fort was gaming at the slot machine and requested an alcoholic beverage from a bar porter. An identification check was initiated by the bar porter, and Ms. Fort failed to produce identification. Security officers were notified and approached Ms. Fort. When they asked her for identification this time, she produced a New Jersey's driver's license. The license was examined, and the photo did not resemble Ms. Fort. Ms. Fort admitted that it belonged to her friend, Brittany Robinson, who was sitting next to her at a slot machine. Both women were escorted to security podium. Ms. Fort did not have any winnings on her, and she did not consume any alcoholic beverages. She was on the gaming floor for a total of 21 minutes and 25 seconds. Ms. Fort gained access via the main entrance and provided the posted security officer with Ms. Robinson's identification card. Ms. Fort was permanently evicted by security and was charged by the Pennsylvania State Police with carrying a false identification card. Also, this was self-reported by Sands. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the Board approve this consent agreement between both parties. The terms of the settlement include that within 5 days of the Board's order approving this consent agreement, Sands shall pay a civil penalty of $39,000 for the alleged violations described. Also, within 5 days of the Board's order approving this consent agreement, Sands shall pay the Board $2,500 for the costs incurred by OEC, BIE, and other related staff in connection with this matter. Further, Sands shall immediately review its policies and controls and provide training and guidance for its employees, which will minimize the opportunity for reoccurrence of similar incidents in the future. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to take them at this point, and there are representatives from Sands here available as well.
Good morning, Mr.
Excuse me one second. I would just ask that anybody from Sands who's addressing the board to state and spell your name for the court reporter, and a non-attorney should probably be sworn in if they're going to be speaking.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Commissioners. I'm outside counsel Scott Kramer, Kramer, from Duane Morris. With me today is Sands President and Chief Operating Officer Mark Giuliano. Sands accepts the jurisdiction of the board, enters into this consent agreement freely and voluntarily, and learns from instances of this nature, and as discussed with the Office of Enforcement Counsel, the remedial measures taken to address each of these incidents. And the board penalty, if this consent agreement is approved, will be paid today.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board on this matter?
Yes. It's going to be to Mr. Giuliano, so maybe we can have him sworn.
If you please be sworn.
Yes. Thank you. And just one quick question. On incident 2, Mr. Rowland, I believe you stated that the individual was served 2 drinks. It was a male within 15 minutes by the same cocktail waitress. Do you know, was there a discipline taken against her? And if not, you can give us the information later. But
I don't know the exact discipline that was taken against her, but our policy would have a suspension involved. And
if you could,
I'm sure that it was, but we will get that back to you.
Thank you. If you could just confirm that with us, that's my only question. Thank you.
Any other questions? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Sands Bethworks Gaming as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next consent agreement that will be presented has been negotiated between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Dung Nguyen. This matter will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel Benjamin Farrell. Mr. Nguyen's attorney could not be here today. He negotiated the consent agreement on behalf of Mr. Nguyen. But Mr. Nguyen, his attorney advised me that Mr. Nguyen would be here to present any information that he may have to the board. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Assistant Enforcement Counsel Benjamin Farrell.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Benjamin Farrell, F-E-R-R-E-L-L. The next matter for your consideration is a consent agreement entered into between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Dung Nguyen regarding a petition for placement on the exclusion list filed by OEC on December 4th of 2015. The petition for placement on the exclusion list alleged that on June 14th of 2015, Mr. Nguyen reset 2 of his hands while playing Asian poker at Harrah's Philadelphia Casino and Racetrack. Pennsylvania State Police initially charged Mr. Nguyen with 1 count each of cheating under the act and theft by deception. later amending those charges to include disorderly conduct as well. Mr. Nguyen ultimately pled guilty to 1 count of disorderly conduct on November 18th, 2015. Under the terms of the agreed-upon consent agreement, Mr. Nguyen agrees to be placed on the board's involuntary exclusion list for a period of 5 years, but may petition the board for removal after 4 years. Further, should Mr. Nguyen have no additional gambling or gaming-related offenses during that 5-year period of exclusion and abide by the provisions of his placement on the involuntary exclusion list, he may petition for removal from the list without objection from OEC.
Mr. Nguyen, do you wish to speak to the board this morning?
Say again, sir?
Do you wish to address the board this morning?
It's okay, sir.
Okay, then. Any
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just have a question for Enforcement Counsel. It seems unusual to have an agreement that would allow an individual to request a removal from the exclusion list in 4 years, where OEC may still oppose it, and then in 5 years not to. What was the thinking in coming to this agreement?
Well, the Act, the regulations allow anyone who's placed on the exclusion list to petition at any time, any time within that 5-year period. So that's not anything different than would be in the Act. The 5-year ban is the same as under the Act for all people that we place on the exclusion list unless it's otherwise ordered by the board. In this instance, we look at Mr. Nguyen the same way we look at anyone after 5 years. If that individual has not had any additional gambling crimes, has not attempted to enter the casino, has made full restitution to the casino, which is another thing mandated by the consent agreement, and has not had any additional criminal penalties related to gambling, then we would normally just not oppose that individual coming off the exclusion list. That does not take the discretion from the board at that time to say, well, while you might not object to it, OEC, the board does not feel comfortable with it, so we want the person to remain. That does not take any discretion away from the board. It only places what OEC normally does in those situations in a consent agreement, and Mr. Nguyen's attorney agreed to the consent agreement with the approval of Mr. Nguyen, thereby keeping any appeal to Commonwealth Court out of the mix, and us being able to ensure that Harris received all the money that was due to them that was taken by Mr. Nguyen. So that's the only purpose we.
So the attempt to keep any action from taking place at least for 4 years was part of the negotiation. So under the Act, he will not even be. He couldn't appeal in year 3. He couldn't appeal in year 2.
And he couldn't even petition the board until year 4. So any other time, someone could have petitioned any time within that 5-year period. So we put it off, and also it allows us to keep. As one less thing that we have to keep track of. If somebody files a petition, going back, digging in our records, okay, why was this person placed on the list and everything else? We have a consent agreement. So everything is on record. We don't have to concern ourselves with this for another 4 years. We'll put a ticker in the system to notify us. And when Mr. Nguyen comes back up, we'll deal with it then. I've already expressed to Mr. Nguyen's attorney that it is very unlikely that we will not object after that 4-year ban, but we will leave that to the board's discretion if the board decides to let him off in 2020. But if he stays clean until 2021 and there are no other issues, we would have any reason to object to his removal.
Okay. During my tenure on the board, I haven't experienced a vote similar to this.
It's rare that, I mean, we've had some people that we've negotiated 2-year bans for, you know, this one, because it was a cheating offense, I wasn't willing to do anything other than what was mandated under the Act. I think it was, you know, for his attorney to close out the case, for him to put this matter behind him, and for the big plus for us was to ensure that Harris got full restitution. And it wouldn't do anything to jeopardize our situation anyway, and it still leaves full discretion with the board in the end.
Mr. Nguyen, since your attorney is not here, I just ask you directly, do you agree with the terms of this condition?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board issue an order to approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Dung Nguyen as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Thank you.
The next two matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel has filed complaints seeking the revocation of one gaming permit and one non-gaming registration issued to individuals under the Board's jurisdiction. Each complaint has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the complaint. The individual named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each named individual. Thereby, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the Board, and the matters are presently ripe for the Board's consideration. I believe Assistant Enforcement Counsel John Crow has both matters, and he will present them to the Board for your consideration.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the Board. John Crow, CROHE for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter before the Board is a request to consider the revocation of Tanner Farver's gaming permit issued to him in connection with his former position as a security officer at Prescott Casino. In March of 2016, Mr. Farver was charged with 2 counts of intentional possession of a controlled substance and 2 counts of possession with intent to deliver a controlled substance. Mr. Farver ultimately pled guilty to 2 counts of intentional possession of a controlled substance, and OEC now requests that the Board revoke the gaming permit held by Tanner Farver.
Any questions or comments from the Board? I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board issue an order to approve the revocation of Tanner Farver's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter before the Board is a request to consider the revocation of Alyssa Silas's non-gaming employee registration issued in connection with her former position as a beverage server at Harris Casino. In March of 2016, Alyssa Silas was charged with 1 count of receiving stolen property after possessing a stolen check. OEC now requests that the Board revoke the non-gaming employee registration held by Alyssa Silas.
Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board issue an order to approve the revocation of Alyssa Silas's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The remaining 18 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel has filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and are licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in each petition. The individual named in the petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation, and as a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each individual. Thereby, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the Board, and the matters are presently ripe for the Board's consideration.
The next matter for consideration is a petition to place Tony Allen on the Board's involuntary exclusion list. On July 18th, 2015, Mr. Allen engaged in card switching on 2 different occasions at Sugar House Casino. At this time, OEC would request that the Board place Tony Allen on the Board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board issue an order to approve the addition of Tony Allen to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is a petition to place Jason McCabe on the involuntary exclusion list. On July 6, 2016, Mr. McCabe left 3 children, ages 13, 13, and 4, unattended in his vehicle while he gamed at Harrah's Philadelphia Casino and Racetrack. At this time, OEC would request that the Board place Mr. McCabe on the Board's involuntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments from the Board?
Mr. Chairman, I will be making the motion, but I would refer back to the comments that Commissioner Fite had made earlier about specific instances in which the Board exercised its discretion based upon the facts.
Thank you. May I have a motion then?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to reject OEC's request to place Jason McCabe on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list, given the ages of the children left in the vehicle, the short duration of the time the children were in the car, the fact that Mr. McCabe's criminal history does not support the conclusion that he is a career or professional offender.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you. Glenn Stewart for the Office of Enforcement Counsel, STUART. The next two matters on the agenda are the same fact pattern, so if it's okay, I'll just read one fact pattern and we can address each individual. Next for the board's consideration is the placement of Mark Gallus and Daisy Merlino on the board's involuntary exclusion list. Daisy Merlino was 18 years of age when she gained access to the gaming floor at the Valley Forge Casino Resort using an identification belonging to another person. Ms. Merlino accessed the gaming floor as the guest of Mark Gallus, who holds a seasonal dining club membership at Valley Forge. While on the gaming floor, Ms. Merlino consumed alcoholic beverages, but she did not wager at any slot machine or any table game. As such, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the board place Mark Gallus on the exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to reject the addition of Mark Gallus to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list, again, under the facts and circumstances here that we felt that his conduct did not warrant placement on the list.
The Office of...
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests the board place Daisy Merlino on the exclusion list.
Motion is adopted.
Sorry.
Thank you. And now we're on to Daisy Merlino.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that Daisy Merlino be placed on the exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Daisy Merlino to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list until at least her 22nd birthday, at which time she may petition for removal from the list.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. Kim Adams for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter for the board's consideration is the placement of Christopher Gillespie on the board's involuntary excluded persons list. Mr. Gillespie and two other patrons were involved in attempted theft of a cell phone of a patron at Mohegan Sun Pocono. When questioned about the incident, Mr. Gillespie became combative with Mohegan Sun Pocono personnel, and when requested, refused to leave the premise, had to be restrained by personnel, and the police were contacted. Mr. Gillespie was charged with disorderly conduct, to which he pled guilty to. The Office of Enforcement Counsel is requesting Mr. Gillespie be placed on the excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Christopher Gillespie to the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter for the board's consideration is the placement of Chat Nguyen on the board's involuntary excluded persons list. Mr. Nguyen struck a slot machine on more than one occasion while at Mohegan Sun Pocono, causing damage to the machine in the amount of $1,205.06. The criminal charges against Mr. Nguyen were dismissed after he paid restitution to Mohegan Sun Pocono. The Office of Enforcement Counsel is requesting Mr. Nguyen be placed on the excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Chat Nguyen to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter for the board's consideration is the placement of Henry Rush on the board's involuntary excluded persons list. Mr. Rush struck a slot machine on more than one occasion while at Mohegan Sun Pocono, causing damage to the machine in the amount of $735. Mr. Rush was criminally charged, and those charges are still pending. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel is requesting Mr. Rush be placed on the excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Henry Rush to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. Again, David Tepper with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next two matters arise out of the same fact pattern. So with your permission, I would like to address the fact patterns one and then each individually. In February 2016, Andrew Weisbach aided and abetted his 19-year-old son, William Weisbach, in gaining access to the gaming floor at Mount Airy. William Weisbach used a fake ID to gain access to the gaming floor, where he remained for an aggregate amount of approximately 6 hours and played craps and blackjack for an aggregate amount of approximately 4 hours. Both Andrew and William Weisbach were cited by the Pennsylvania State Police. With regard to Andrew Weisbach, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Andrew Weisbach to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Andrew Weisbach to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list for a period of at least 1 year, at which point he may petition the board for removal from the list.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
With regards to William Weisbach, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add William Weisbach to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of William Weisbach to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list until at least his 22nd birthday, at which time he may petition the board for removal from the list.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter involves Debbie Conter. In March 2016, Debbie Conter engaged in a course of conduct at Mount Airy Casino, which led to arresting criminal charges for promoting prostitution and open lewdness. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Debbie Conter to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Debbie Conter to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter involves Yavuz Souzer. In February 2016, Mr. Souzer struck and broke the screen of a slot machine at Mount Airy Casino. Mr. Souzer then refused to leave after being requested by both Mount Airy and the Pennsylvania State Police, leading to charges being filed by the Pennsylvania State Police. At this time, we request that Yavuz Souzer be added to the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Yavuz Souzer to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter today is a request for placement on the board's exclusion list involving Terrence Harrell. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Harrell on the exclusion list on March 17, 2016 for attempting to steal $2,500 worth of chips from a blackjack table at Parks Casino. Mr. Harrell was charged with attempted theft due to this incident. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place Terrence Harrell on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? Motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Terrence Harrell to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter today is a request for placement on the board's exclusion list involving Tyara Moore. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Ms. Moore on the exclusion list on April 5, 2016 for breaking into a vehicle at Parks Casino and stealing money and a computer. Ms. Moore was charged with 2 counts of theft and receiving stolen property due to the incident. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place Tyara D. Moore on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Tayara Moore to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next 2 matters today are related. With the board's permission, I'll read one set of facts and then ask that each individual be placed on the exclusion list. On December 8, 2015, Amar Awade and Galia Mahaid entered Parks Casino. Mr. Awade and Ms. Mahaid are husband and wife. At the time that Mr. Awade and Ms. Mahaid entered Parks Casino, Ms. Mahaid was 19 years old. Mr. Awade and Ms. Mahaid remained on the gaming floor at Parks Casino for 1 hour and 26 minutes. During that time, Ms. Mahaid played 20 hands of blackjack, consumed an alcoholic beverage. During the course of their visit to the casino, Mr. Awade attempted to use Ms. Mahaid's identification to obtain a cash advance. After the cage cashier rejected the transaction due to Ms. Mahaid being underage, Mr. Awade and Ms. Mahaid returned to the blackjack table before being questioned by security and subsequently being evicted from Parks Casino.
This time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Awade on the exclusion list on March 29, 2016, for knowingly allowing his underage wife to gain access to the gaming floor at Parks Casino. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place Amar Awade on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to deny OEC's request to place Amari Awade on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list, as there is no evidence of record that he assisted his wife to gain access to the casino floor.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Ms. Mahade on the exclusion list on March 29, 2016, for gaining access to the gaming floor at Parks Casino while underage and underage gaming. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place Galia Mahade on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Galia Mahade to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list until at least her 22nd birthday, at which time she may petition the board for removal from the list.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter today is a request for placement on the board's excluded persons list involving Mukesh Patel. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Patel on the exclusion list on February 23, 2016, for exposing his genitals and urinating on the floor at Parks Casino. Mr. Patel was charged with indecent exposure and open lewdness due to this incident. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place Mukesh Patel on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Mukesh Patel to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Commissioner, before you proceed, Commissioner Fite has pointed out that I think we made a technical mistake here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize to my board members. I had mixed up the Awadi and Mahad case with the Gallus and Daisy Merlino case. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to go back and ask for another vote on the Mark Gallus matter, and I would make the motion that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Mark Gallus to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list for a period of at least 1 year, at which point he may petition for removal from the list.
Make sure we have the right case here.
I do.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll pay better attention next time.
Yeah, you're going to have to stay after class.
More Starbucks.
Yeah, a little more coffee for you. Please proceed.
The final two matters today are also related. With the board's permission, I'll read one set of facts and then ask that each individual be placed on the exclusion list. On April 8, 2015, Jaquiras Ramos and Wayner Segura followed a patron of Parks Casino out of the casino into the patron's home in New Jersey. At that time, Mr. Ramos and Mr. Segura assaulted and robbed the patron. Subsequently, Mr. Ramos and Mr. Segura returned to Parks Casino in the early morning hours of April 9, 2015, and followed another patron to her home in Bristol Township, Pennsylvania, and robbed that patron at gunpoint. Through cooperation between law enforcement and casino personnel, Mr. Ramos and Mr. Segura were identified, and criminal charges relating to the robberies were filed in both New Jersey and Pennsylvania. On April 5, 2016, Mr. Ramos pleaded guilty to robbery in Burlington County, New Jersey, and in May 2016, Mr. Ramos was sentenced to 6 years in prison for his actions. Likewise, on March 28, 2016, Mr. Segura pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit burglary in Burlington County, New Jersey, and was scheduled to be sentenced to 8 years in prison in May of 2016. However, Mr. Segura did not appear for his sentencing hearing and remains a fugitive from justice. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Ramos on the exclusion list on April 12, 2016 for assaulting and robbing 2 Parks Casino patrons. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place Jaquiras Ramos on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Jaquirs Ramos to the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Segura on the exclusion list on April 12, 2016 for assaulting and robbing two Parks Casino patrons. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asks that the board place Wayner Segura on the board's excluded persons list.
Any questions or comments from the board? I have a comment, which is I would imagine, given Mr. Segura being a fugitive from justice, he's probably not likely to be showing up in our casinos. But nevertheless, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to approve the addition of Wayner Segura to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Concludes our business. Thank you.
September 7th. Okay. That concludes the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Thank everyone for their participation. That concludes today's meeting. Our next scheduled public meeting will be held on Wednesday, September 7th. The meeting will begin at 10 a.m. in this room. Are there any other final comments from the board or ex officios? In that instance, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank everybody for their patience.
Yeah.